Hello everyone. Nice to see you on my channel, Touching Stories. The story I'm going to tell you today is pure, true, brutal, and kind. It is true that all the bad things that happen in life happen for a reason. It is said that we can appreciate the good things when we get them. I wish you an enjoyable watching time. Conflict of generations. They came up with abstruse names and now all quarrels, all clashes and scandals in their family can be covered up with these words. Jim remembered over and over again the psychologist's appointment his mother had dragged him to. He doesn't understand, you see, that his mother has a right to her own private life too. Interesting movie. Yes, he would be the first to rejoice for his mother, for her feminine happiness, if only her chosen one was not Ben. What's wrong with that? She'll be 50 soon, and she's chosen a young Alphonse. A guy only 10 years older than Jim himself. And he's so handsome. You can see with the naked eye that all he wants from his mother is a good life and presence. He's got girls all over him. The new man used to be a fitness instructor. It was at this fitness club that Anne met Ben. Jim remembered his conversation with his mother after his first visit to the club. That night she came home excited and happy. "Jim, your mother's not so bad after all," she announced from the doorway, tossing her gym bag somewhere in the corner, which was not like her at all. "Mom, are you in love or something?" Jim smiled. "If I'd have thrown my rucksack, you would have killed me with your grumbling." "Oh, never mind that bag. And anyway, you're all boring." The mother fell back in her chair and laughed with the girl's bouncy laughter. "Imagine, son, that I can still be liked. Who would have doubted it? Mom, you're a smart and beautiful girl." "Exactly." Anne got up from her chair and went to the mirror, carefully and meticulously looked at herself from all sides and was satisfied. Here a little pump, here a little tighten, and I'll be back in the line of enviable brides. Anne really looked very attractive for her age. Taut, athletic, youthful, always elegantly and tastefully dressed, makeup and hair from the best craftsmen. In principle, she has always kept her figure up to the mark, and her face and hair. God forbid, because she was the owner of several beauty salons. So her well-groomed appearance must serve as a kind of advertisement and attract visitors. But recently, the woman has begun to notice some signs of aging, which is quite natural at her age. In particular, her muscles have weakened slightly, so she decided to sign up for fitness classes. The very first session made her so enthusiastic that her son immediately realized it was not just a workout, but something much more. She must have met a man who wooed her, showered her with compliments, and gave her confidence. And that first day the son was heartily happy for his mother. After all, it had been so many long years of loneliness since his father had disappeared. Dad. Jim still remembers the pain that consumed him, just a little boy, the moment his father disappeared. The boy was only 6 years old then. He often heard his parents fighting. It surprised and upset him that his mother and father sometimes yelled at each other, so much so that they seemed to hate each other. At such moments, the child would lock himself in his room, tightly squeeze his eyes shut, and cover his ears with his hands so he would not hear what words his beloved mom and dad called each other. After a violent quarrel, the parents could be silent for days without speaking to each other and addressing only their son. It looked a little funny. "Son, tell your mother that at her age she never learned how to cook. She doesn't even know that it should be salted, not salted. Son, tell your gourmet father that if he doesn't like to eat at home, he can go to a restaurant or cook for himself." A week went by, and the parents were happy and cheerful again, but not for long again. One day the boy asked his mother, "Mom, why do you and Dad fight all the time? Don't you love each other?" "Of course we do, son, of course we do," his mother reassured him. "It's just that with adults everything is different. When you grow up, you'll see for yourself." Jim had grown up, but he still didn't understand. If they were unhappy together, why didn't they divorce? Did the mother not want to leave the child without a father? But that's so unlike a mother. Such a self-sufficient woman wouldn't put up with her husband just for the sake of her son. Besides, times are different now. If the parents separated, the son could still see his father, even if only on weekends or during vacations. The parents argued, but did not break up, not even realizing what suffering they inflicted on their young son through their stormy quarrels and reconciliations. In those days, the woman had just opened her first barbershop and almost all day long was at work. My father, meanwhile, was downsizing at his factory and sat all day long in front of the television. Of course, this reduction gave a new reason to tease my mother. "Well, comrade engineer, how long will you keep wiping the couch with your bottom?" Woman sarcastically asked. "Be a man, finally get up and find yourself a decent job." "And blushing," my father answered. "But you know very well that with my education it's now difficult to find a job. I'm looking at ads, send out summaries, but so far to no avail. And there will be no results with such an education." My mother exploded. "Look for another job. I'm running around like a squirrel in a wheel, day and night, developing my business. And it's hard for you to lift a finger. Go as a lineman, a courier, go to the market. Think of something, at least learn another profession." "Am I eating you and your son?" The father was indignant. "You are not at home all the time, and the boy himself does not feed, do not wash, and do not gather. Have you ever helped your son with his homework, or checked his homework, or checked his homework? Or maybe went to a parent teacher conference? Jim's school doesn't even know what his mom looks like." One day his dad was sitting as usual in front of the TV. Jim walked up to him and asked him the same question he once asked his mother. "Dad, don't you and Mom love each other? Why do you always fight?" The father then looked sadly at his son. "Everything is very complicated in adult relationships. Son, I love your mother. I think she loves me. We just have such a temperament." And what is the temperament? Did not understand the little boy. It's when a person does not keep resentment inside himself, explained his father, and spills outside. My mother and I are the closest people to each other, and sometimes you can say hurtful or rude words only to those you care about or whom you love. That's why he is the closest and dearest, because he will understand and forgive everything. And again, the boy did not understand. You can love, cherish, and hurt, and call him names. How complicated things are with adults. Jim liked Helen. He will never hurt her, on the contrary. He will protect her from the other boys. He doesn't like Andrew, so he can hit him with a ruler if he clings to him. It's not clear. One day, the boy came home from school, and there was no one at home. He knew his mother was coming home from work very late. But Dad, maybe he was out somewhere? Usually his father had time to do all the chores outside the apartment while his son was at school, and there had never yet been a time when his dad wasn't home when the boy came home. He shrugged and went to his room. He minded his own business, did his homework, and played a game of console. Finally, the boy got hungry and left his room, but his daddy was still gone, and it was getting dark. In the kitchen, Jim saw that no food was prepared. It was the same as the morning he left for school. The boy found sausage and bread in the refrigerator and ate dinner. Now Jim's anxiety was growing by the minute. Had something happened to Daddy? What if it was something bad? What if it was something bad? What if Dad had been hit by a car and was in the hospital? He had to call Mom right away. He dialed the number of the hairdressers and called his mother on the phone. "Son, I'm very busy." "What's going on?" "Mom, Dad's not home." "Mom, Dad's not home." My son blurted out. "What do you mean, he's not home?" The mother is frantic. "Where is he? How long has he been gone? I came home from school and he was gone." "Well, don't worry, I'm going to call Grandma. She'll come and take care of you." The kid grimaced. He did not like his grandmother very much. She was kind of fake, always hugging him when his mom and dad were home. But when his parents weren't around, she became indifferent and bossy. And worst of all, even with his immature mind, he knew that Elizabeth did not love his father and was setting his mother against her husband. Jim had once heard his grandmother say to his mother, "Anne, why do you want that rat? You're so beautiful, you have your own barber shop. You work like a horse, you provide for your family, and he still sits on the couch during the day. You can't tear him away." "Don't, Mom," Anne grimaced. "He's my husband, the father of my child. After all, it's not his fault he got the wrong education. It's not his fault he was downsized. Intellectuals aren't honorable anymore. But Jim is always looked after, and I make enough money to pay for everything. I can look after my grandson myself, I don't mind. I could move from my village to your place to look after my grandson. And you work." "Oh, you're a sly one, Mom," smiled Anne. "So tell me that you do not want to live in the village. You just have to be patient. When business picks up, I'll open another hairdressing salon. We'll sell your house, I'll add, and we'll buy you an apartment in our city." "Yes, I'll bear it," sighed Elizabeth. "But that's not what I mean. There were so many guys chasing you, so handsome, so promising, with rich parents. And you've chosen that little wretch. What do you need him for? And dump him before it's too late. Well, he's worthless. He's nothing but a misunderstanding. Come on, Mom. Don't talk me into it. We are responsible for those we have tamed." Exupéry also said, "I'm not leaving my husband. He'll be lost without me." The boy didn't understand much at the time, but the main thing he grasped. Grandma didn't like Daddy very much and persuaded his mother to leave him. Jim pushed the memories aside and began to prepare for the session. He was already in his 3rd year of medical school. The material was getting harder and harder. He had to study more and more, and that wouldn't have mattered. But this gigolo, this Alfonso, kept coming back to haunt him. As soon as Ben married his mother, immediately quit his job as a fitness trainer. Of course, what's he got to work for? It's easier to live off the grid. What a leech. And in his eyes, he's so sweet, so sweet. "Anne, my love." And all he's got on his mind is money and presents. When Anne brought Ben to their house for the first time to meet her son, Jim made long preparations. After his father's disappearance, his mother blossomed for the first time. She had become playful and cheerful. And it was clear to the naked eye that the woman was in love. And Jim was very happy for her. She was worthy of happiness. For in essence, what had she seen in her life? Work, 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 and work again. And then there was her son. Little Jim realized that his father had disappeared without a trace. When his father disappeared, raising him fell entirely on his mother's shoulders, and she was torn between him and work. True, Grandma helped at first, but as soon as Mom bought her an apartment, Grandma immediately got busy with her personal life, going to all sorts of interest meetings, getting to know older men, trying to find herself a husband. My daughter had a chain of hair salons, which by that time had become beauty salons. And my grandmother spent 12 hours on various procedures, doing a lot to please the next applicant. So when the mother one day with a cryptic look invited her son to a conversation, the guy immediately knew what he was going to talk about. "Jim, today I want you to meet the man who turned my life upside down. Mom, I'm so happy for you. I can see how your man is affecting you. You just blossomed, so you don't mind, son." "Relieved," sighed the woman. "And I was so worried that you would not accept my chosen one. You had to be happy with him, Mom." Jim laughed. "I'll lay the table myself." "You won't, will you, son?" "There's no need for that. Grandma will come and do it herself." Jim nodded unhappily. He did not like it when Grandmother, who had grown up and lived all her life in the country, came to them. It was as if Grandma had gotten her hands on the delights of city life. She always abused makeup, wore flamboyant outfits beyond her age, and was all nervous and kind of two-faced, hypocritical. Jim imagined a solid, intelligent man, modest and adoring of his mother, walking into their house in the evening. And when the doorbell rang and the dressed-up mother rushed out to open it, the boy pulled himself together and looked like a young mother's grown-up son. And in the living room came the slinky young dude. Jim was taken aback. Who was this guy? Maybe the son of his mother's friend. But suddenly Elizabeth spreads a satisfied smile. Ben, my friend, how nice to see you again, she murmured. And Jim was horrified to realize that this dude was Mom's fiancé, and that Grandma had known him for a long time. Had Mama gone blind? How could she make that choice? Ben Fake smiled and kissed my grandmother's outstretched hand. Good evening, sweetest Elizabeth, Ben sang in a sweet voice. I'm delighted to meet you, and reached for Anne. Anne, my love, I am happy. And he kissed his mother on the cheek. Anne blushed with pleasure and turned to her son. Jim, I'd like you to meet Jim. This is my friend Ben, and this is my son, Jim. Ben looked at Jim ironically. Heard a lot about you from Anne. I hope you and I will become friends, Jim muttered. And after excusing himself, he left for his room. His mother followed him in. Jim, what's the matter with you? Why did you leave? I got a headache. Tell me the truth, son. Anne looked into his eyes with compassion. Didn't you like Ben? Mom, I have no right to tell you who you can have a relationship with, Jim began. But he's young, Mom. He's a bit older than me. How could you get involved with him? Jim tried to find the right words not to offend his mother. I don't think he loves you. He's clearly a show-off. He just made a fool of you, and you are unused to male attention and believed the first man you met. Anne got up from her chair and spoke resentfully. Jim, I believed you when you said you were happy for me. I believed you would accept my choice. I don't care how much younger Ben is than me. I feel good with him, you know. I feel good with him, you know. I feel like a real woman again after all these years. And you want to deprive me of the beautiful feeling I found. He may not be the limit of my dreams, and I am well aware of his weaknesses. But life doesn't stand still. Your father disappeared a long time ago, many years ago. And since then, I haven't had a second felt like a woman. You see, son, you are an adult. You're an adult, and you can understand the relationship between the sexes. So don't make me choose between the sexes. So don't make me choose between a woman's happiness and you. Naturally, I'll choose you, but I'll remain unhappy. Is that all right with you? Jim hugged his mother tenderly and said affectionately, What are you, mother? Forgive me. Let him be young and calculating. As long as you are happy. Peace. Peace, peace, come with us. Sit down, please. The mother looked at her son pleadingly once more, and they went out into the living room alone. Throughout the evening, Ben shone as he thought with wit. His grandmother, whenever she heard a silly joke, burst out laughing. Mother simply smiled, looking at the dude with amorous eyes, while Jim frowned and looked away. Thus began Mother's torrid affair with this Alphonse. Then one day the mother walked into her son's room with a guilty smile on her face. Son, I need to talk to you seriously. What's wrong? The son became alarmed. I'm getting married. You're what? The boy flinched as if he had been struck. Don't do anything foolish, please. I understand. You're having an affair. I've accepted your love, but to marry this gigolo is already a bit crazy. Did he hypnotize you? Don't be like that, son, my mother asked me gently. You are an adult. You will soon start your own life. You will soon start your own life. You will get married and live with your family. And I need a loved one by my side. So live with your lover for as long as you want. So why formalize a relationship? Why don't you just take this guy's last name too? All right, Jim, there's no need to be sarcastic. My mother is blushing. I'm just letting you know it's a done deal, and it's done. Even know what happened to Dad? the boy exclaimed helplessly. "We don't even have information that he is dead. What if he is found? A certain period of time has passed. He has already been declared officially dead. I am a widow, so I have the right to legally register the marriage. My mother raised her voice, with whomever I want. It's up to you to accept my decision, but you can't stop me." The mother left her son's room, slamming the door. He felt as if he had been plunged into an ice hole of water. How could it be? Mother had lost her head from her love. Can't she see how phony and disgusting this lover is? No one even calls him by his full name. Poor Papa, where are you? On the fateful day his father disappeared, his mother called her grandmother, who quickly showed up at their apartment. She went into her grandson's room and stroked the boy's head with feigned sympathy. "Poor child, what a scoundrel your father is. He left his family, his little boy. You see, what a scoundrel, and he pretended to be an intellectual."
"Oh, it's not true," the boy cried.
"My daddy didn't leave us. He loves me and my mom, and you're mean. You hate my daddy. Why should I love him?" Granny said angrily. "What good has he done for you? First he got a penny as an engineer in his factory, and soon he was out of that kind of money. And then he sat at home for years on your mother's neck. What good did my poor girl see with your daddy?" Then my mother came into the room with a quick step, seeing her son crying. "Mom, you're gloating. What if something really happened to him?" "Oh, what can happen to a man these days?" my grandmother answered sarcastically. "He's tied up with some skirt, and that's the end of it. Now he's sitting in some cozy kitchen with a new woman and doesn't give a damn. I don't have to work. I don't have to look after my child. Mom, stop it at once," Anne commanded and hugged her son. "Do not cry, little one. I'll go to the police now. Write a report. They will find our daddy." Mother went back to grandmother. "And you sit down at the phone. Take the phone book and start calling all the hospitals and morgues." Mom went to the police, filed a report. The complaint was accepted, of course, but warned that the investigation will begin only 3 days after the disappearance. Those were the rules. Dreary days of waiting and worry lingered. The boy constantly imagined the most terrible pictures, where his father was in an accident, or he was beaten and lost his memory. Then the most terrible things came to mind. What if he was no longer in this world? At night, the boy would have nightmares, and he would wake up in a cold sweat. "Do not suffer so," his mother reassured him at such times. "If anything had happened to your daddy, we would have heard about it long ago. He's not in any hospital, and thank God he's not in any morgue. Don't worry so much. We'll find our daddy." But the boy could see that his mother was constantly losing hope, and increasingly he began to notice how she came out of her bedroom in the morning with puffy eyes, as if she had been crying all night, as if she had already decided for herself that her husband would never come back. And now so many years had passed. Daddy hasn't found him, and Mom has fallen in love with a young con man and is going to marry him. The boy shook his head, trying to get rid of the memories. It was time to go to the institute. It warmed his soul. Today he would see the one whose image had always been before his eyes lately. Helen. He had known Helen since kindergarten. Back then he liked the girl with blonde curls very much, and he took her under his patronage, protecting her from the boys who were always trying to pull the pretty girl by the plate. He would sit with her at the table at lunch and give her the tastiest sweets. Then they were in the same class at school, and the friendship continued in the best tradition of high school friendship. Jim carried her backpack, walked her home after school, and they sat at the same desk. Well, as is customary among classmates, they were teased as bride and groom, which, however, did not offend the boy. But on the contrary, he was proud and pleased, because almost all the boys in the class liked her. But she only accepted friendship favorably from him, from Jim. Helen's parents were not wealthy people. Her mother worked as a janitor, and her father was a plumber in the same department as his wife, and, as was customary with most of the plumbing trade, he drank mercilessly. When he got drunk, he would raise his hand against his wife. When he was sober, Uncle George was the nicest man, cheerful and kind. But when he drank, it was as if a demon had got into him at such moments. Helen's mother, Aunt Rose, would take her daughter and spend the night in the den. As the boys got a little older, Jim, with Aunt Rose's permission, invited Helen to his house. They would do homework and play together. And then Aunt Rose would come and get her daughter. Mom would invite Aunt Rose over for tea, and the women would sit in the kitchen for a long time, sharing their problems. Once in a while, Aunt Rose agreed to stay the night, but not always. Strange as it may seem, the woman was proud and would not let anyone pity her. Rose, sometimes Anne would turn to her. Why do you need this alcoholic? Leave him alone. You are still a young, beautiful woman. You will find yourself a decent man. Oh, you know, Anne, Rose answered. I love my George. So what if he drinks? It's a disease. I won't leave a sick man, and there's nothing to love for. I'm not sure what it is, but it's in spite of something. And he would disappear without me, get drunk and fall asleep in a snowdrift somewhere. No, this was my cross to bear to the end. There was so much dignity in the woman's words that all attempts to persuade her to leave her husband immediately ceased. And Anne knew that George wasn't a bad man either. What about drinking? Half the country drank. Only he was lucky to have a faithful and devoted wife. Then the women spent a long time remembering all the good things about their husbands. My mother cried a little, remembering her husband, and her neighbor comforted her. But the grandmother did not approve of her daughter's and grandson's friendship with this family. Have those plebeians been sleeping over again? She grumbled. Mother, since when did you become a noblewoman? She waved her hands. A week since I moved to town. Not long ago you had facilities in the yard. And now it's all over, noblewoman. That's not what I meant, my daughter. The woman was flirting. They may be good people, but you're a businesswoman, a rich woman, a businesswoman, as they say, not a janitor and an alcoholic plumber. You should have a reputation, and you should have friends of your own caliber. Oh, Mom, the woman waved him off. As they used to say in one movie, I have such an impeccable reputation that it's high time I was compromised. Soon the boys were graduating from high school. Uncle George was dead by then, and Jim's dad was missing, but their mothers continued to be friends, enjoying the children's relationship and dreaming of becoming related someday. So Jim and Helen decided to go to medical school together. Helen was a little behind her friend in preparation, and so Jim spent the whole time coaching his friend on all the subjects before she got in. And they both got to the institute successfully enough. The student life began. And that's where the unpleasant surprise hit the guy. The girl grew into a very attractive girl. Short, slender, with clean blonde hair and big blue eyes. Like a delicate and fragile Chinese statuette, the girl attracted everyone's attention. Both envious looks from the other girls and admiring looks from the guys. Jim was nervous. It seemed to him that he might soon lose his beloved friend. What if she was attracted to some handsome man? What would happen to him then? After all, he had long been without memory, in love with a girl. True, never once dared to admit it to her, afraid to hear in response something like, "You're just my best friend." Then it would be all over with him. But in the unknown there was at least some faint hope. It was comforting to know that though his beloved had accepted the advances of other guys, she had not given anyone the hope to continue the relationship. But now the threat of losing his beloved loomed large. A new student, Max, transferred to their institute. His parents moved to their city from the capital, and the son, accordingly, transferred from the capital university to them. From his first days at the institute, the unusually attractive boy captured the hearts of all the female students. The girls followed him around, sighed languidly, and hoped that someday this handsome man would pay his attention to one of them. But as our hero feared, the capital's handsome man, spoiled by women's attention, turned his eyes on Helen, his Helen, and the latter, flattered by this, blossomed like a rose. Jim was not seriously frightened when one day Helen confessed to him, "Jim, it's true Max is very handsome. He invited me to the movies. Jim is worried. Because of the new student who transferred to their institute, his beloved has disowned him." The boy's voice trembled treacherously. "What would you advise me to do?" She gave him a sly look. "He's handsome, of course. All the girls chase him, but I'm kind of scared." Jim grumbled, disgruntled. "As if I were your girlfriend." "But Jimmy," said Jim, shrugging her shoulders in surprise. "You're my best friend. We've been friends since kindergarten, you know. I mean, who better to ask for advice than you? You're like my brother." He was in a heartbeat, and his heart skipped a beat. So that was it. The very words he had been dreading to hear, the ones that had dashed his hopes for love, for reciprocity, for a future together, had been spoken. The boy hunched over, looked at his friend with the eyes of a battered dog, and said indifferently, "You do as you like. If you like it, go to the movies, go dancing, go on a date. I do not care about your heart problems. The session is almost upon us." He turned around and walked away, not seeing how the girl's smile had disappeared from her face, and she leaned against the wall in a frustrated manner, looking bitterly after him. The joyless days and dreary nights began. Even his mother, absorbed in the wedding commotion, noticed her son's condition. "What's the matter with you? Why are you walking around like a drowned in water? Is something wrong?" "No, Mom, I'm fine. And I haven't seen Helen for a long time." Suddenly, the mother asked a question, and judging by her son's reaction, she realized that she had hit the nail on the head. "Did we have a fight or what?" "Don't worry, you're only a quarrel if you quarrel with a sweetheart." "We didn't quarrel," the boy grumbled. "Are we children in short pants to quarrel? It's just that our beauty queen has other priorities now. She doesn't even need to study anymore. All she can think about is dating. Helen is in love with someone, Mom guessed." "Haven't you tried to fight for your love?" "Yes. Do not be surprised. Her mother and I have long understood that you love our girl. Mom, how can I compete with a handsome man who's crazy about all the girls at school?" "What kind of competition am I? I'm her best friend, you see. Almost her brother." Jim waved his hand sorrowfully. "Soon she'll be telling me about her dates and coming crying on my shoulder. She's not a friend, she's a girlfriend. Come on, son." His mother patted him on the shoulder. "Take my advice. Don't give up so easily. You've been friends for years. If she thinks your relationship is a friendship, so you change her mind, believe me, son, happiness does not come easily." Mom thoughtfully sighed and silently left the room. Every day at the institute, a boy could not bear to watch this capital good-looking boy near his sweetheart. How he, like his property, put his arm around her shoulders, softly whispering something in her ear, and she laughed merrily, as she had laughed merrily, as she had laughed merrily, as she had laughed only at his jokes, and how he waited for her. After classes and took her somewhere, and she did not resist. The boy, clenched in his teeth, followed the couple with a hateful look. One day, at one of these moments, a new student, Eliza, came up to him. "Are you suffering?" she asked him understandably. "What do you care?" Jim snarled, but then apologized. "I'm sorry, and don't take offense. I don't really talk down to strangers." "Come on, really talk down to strangers. I'm not offended. I could kill myself. I feel the same way you do." I'm Eliza, and I know you're Jim. What are we gonna do, brother in misery? So you're that guy. The one, he guessed. The one, he guessed. The one, he guessed. The one, he nodded, and our parents have been friends for a long time, and we've been friends since we were kids. But he was the one who was friends, and I've loved him for as long as I can remember. I've even at times it seemed like he loved me, too. I know you think Max is easygoing, but he's good, really. And what? Your good Igor dumped you. The guy squinted his eyes and got embarrassed. I'm sorry. I'm jealous. I'm freaking out. Yeah, me too. So am I. When Max and his family moved here, and he transferred to this institute, I dropped everything and followed him. Also asked my dad to arrange a transfer. And you see what happened. The girl grinned mirthlessly. He saw your Helen and lost his head. What am I to do? Jim sighed. Think, Jim. Think, Jim. Think, Jim. Think, did I follow him halfway across the country like a Decemberist wife for nothing? We'll make a plan to get our loved ones back. Agreed. Now he was rushing back to the institute, hopeful. They would meet with their unfortunate friend after classes, go to the park, and then proceed to develop a plan to bring back their loved ones. Weighing all the pros and cons, the girl suggested, let's pretend love and a relationship to cause jealousy. Do you think it would work? Why wouldn't it, as an option? The girl shrugged her shoulders. And you and I have been together so long that we're used to thinking of each other as an integral part of ourselves. But if you and I are so touched that our halves have started other relationships, maybe they wouldn't like seeing us together either. And if they really are in love? Sadly, the boy asked. We won't know unless we try. You can be sure. So here's the plan. A few days later, after discussing the plan, Eliza and Jim walked over to Max and Helen. The four of us have known each other for a good 100 years, the girl began. We've been friends for so long that we're practically related. And now you and Helen have started a relationship. And me and Jim, I suggest we continue to be friends in pairs. Max looked at Eliza in surprise, and Helen looked at Jim in confusion. Are you really a couple? Max asked incredulously. When did you do that? It is not so difficult, Jim grinned. We like each other. Eliza and I are going to a cafe tonight. Come with us. Jim, do you really want us to go with you? Helen asked, trying to keep her cool. The news that Jim liked Eliza was somehow an unpleasant cut to the heart. Of course we do, Eliza smiled charmingly. When the last pair finished, the young people met at the entrance to the institute and went together to a nice cafe in the town square, which was favored by all the medical students. At first there was some tension between the couples. But Eliza and Jim joked so casually and behaved so lightly that naturally everyone soon relaxed, and Max and Helen, by the end of their dinner together, already considered themselves best friends again. At the first stage, the plan worked. Jim and Eliza decided to pretend to be a couple to make their loved ones jealous. Mom and Ben's wedding was held at a fancy restaurant. There weren't many guests. Grandma and another elderly catcher, Aunt Rose, Jim and Eliza and Helen and Max and the employees of all the beauty salons owned by the newlyweds. Ben with Jim had invited only a few friends from his work, similarly athletic and handsome fitness trainers. Jim looked at his young but already visibly aged mother and the lush, smug groom standing beside her. He pitied his mother with all his heart. Listen, Jim, Eliza asked in a whisper. Does your mother really believe this young man is marrying for love? I don't know, answered the boy sadly. She's a smart woman. I think she's got it all figured out. She just wants to get her own piece of love. I can't stand his fake face. Come on, relax. She tugged at the guy's sleeve. Don't forget about us. Come on, give me a hug. Jim pulled Eliza down in his arms with deliberate passion and glanced furtively at Helen. She was staring at them, and she didn't seem happy about it. Look, he whispered to his friend, and our Romeo and Juliet are not as smooth as they seem. They're sitting next to each other, but they're like strangers. Yes, I see. She smiled happily. I think our plan is beginning to work. And the girl dragged her companion to the dance floor. Just started a slow song. The guy led the girl in the dance and decided not to pay attention to her mother and Ben, or to Helen and Ben. He was tired of all the twists and turns in other people's relationships. Tonight he would just rest. Thinking to a romantic melody, the guy flinched, feeling a touch on his shoulder. There was Max standing next to him. "Old boy, let me take your girl for one dance." In a friendly way. "Yes, please." Letting go of Jim Eliza, she smiled indifferently at Max and put her hands on his shoulders. Jim came to the table and picked up a flute of champagne. Suddenly, Helen came up to him and embarrassedly suggested, "Jim, why don't we dance too? We haven't had a heart-to-heart talk for so long." "Yes, let's go." He took her by the hand and led her to the dance floor. He danced, and the boy listened to himself. He was glad to see Helen pressed against him and even put her head on his chest. "Jim, who's Eliza to you?" asked the girl. "What do you mean?" Didn't understand the boy. "Well, do you love her? She's nice." "I don't know if I love her, but I like being together with her." "I'm happy for you." "Well, a very beautiful couple," whispered Helen. "I don't hear any joy in your voice," the boy joked. "And what do you and Max have? Love and carrots, more like blood love. Roses and tears," sighed the girl. "Something has gone wrong with us lately. But come on, what are we all about us? Today your mother is so beautiful and happy." "Yeah," the boy gritted his teeth. "Happiness is coming out of every crevice. You know, Jim." The girl pulled away suddenly. "I remembered a guy threatened this groom. They didn't see me. I went out into the foyer to make a phone call, and there they were talking in high tones." Jim stopped agitatedly. "What exactly did you hear?" Vladik promised to think of something, and the other threatened to tell everything. And yes, the girl looked at her watch. Ben suggested that his companion meet him at the front of the restaurant. "Yes, in 5 minutes, and discuss everything." Jim muttered excitedly. "Okay, not a word to anyone. I don't know what this creep is up to, but it feels like something fucked up. I've got to get to the bottom of this." He took the girl to her seat, nodded to Jim, and hurriedly headed for the exit of the restaurant. There he stepped back into the shade, turned on the recorder, and prepared to wait. Finally, Ben came out of the restaurant with some guy from the guests at his side. "Okay, Ben, you do what you want. Take care of your problems. But I want you to pay me all the money you owe me in full in a week. Otherwise, I'll decide what to do with my problems myself. Maybe I'll pass your debt on to someone more assertive. And the interest, mind you, is dripping, and the meter is on. Dennis, bro, just give me a little more time," Alphonse pleaded. "You can see that my business is going well. Soon my wife's fortune will be in my hands. She's in love with me like a cat. Whatever I say, she does." "That's the right move with the old lady, of course," said the lad mockingly. "Right on the mark. She's ready for anything. Play your cards right, and you'll be in the money." "But who am I talking about it? You don't know how to play, but you're still getting into the big game. That's how you ended up with this debt." "I'm sorry. You know I can't stop. But I'll get even soon, believe me. I feel like I've already caught my luck." "You've got trouble on your tail, not luck," he grumbled. "Anyway, I'll give you another week or you're on your own." "All right, I got it. Thank you. I just want to please my old lady a little bit. Then she'll throw everything at my feet. I'll make her do my duty for you, or I'll make her do my duty for you, or I'll make her do it for you." Jim couldn't hold back any longer. He came at them both like a hurricane and started swinging his fists left and right, trying to get them both in trouble. But a medical student was no match for two big jocks. They froze in surprise at first and even missed a couple of punches, but they came to their senses immediately. In a moment, Jim was lying on the dusty sidewalk, and the two were kicking him all over, swearing softly. I don't know what would have become of him, but suddenly, Max and Eliza burst out of the restaurant door, and within minutes, the two muscle men were already lying on the pavement by themselves. The beaten guy watched in amazement as Max and Eliza kicked the big fitness instructors in leaps and bounds, not giving them a second to resist. Now that was a picture worthy of a master's pen. Jim struggled to get up. Every cell in his body ached. What was that, guys? He pronounced with pursed lips. I felt like I was watching a Jackie Chan movie. The guys looked at each other and laughed. It's just that Max and I went to the same martial arts class for years. The girl smiled. How did you find out about that? Helen told us something was going on, Max added, so we rushed to help. You never know. Her friend who had come out stared blankly at the people who were lying there. What happened here? Suddenly she saw Jim beaten, turned pale and rushed to him. Son collected dirt on his mother's Alfonso fiancé. What's the matter with you? You're covered in blood. She took out a handkerchief and began to wipe the blood from the boy's face. Max looked at Eliza. Why don't you run to your lover? Sadly, he asked. Don't you feel sorry for him? Are you jealous? The girl grinned. No. The boy waved his hand. We realized a long time ago that it wouldn't work out. We were just pretending to be a couple to make you jealous. Then Jim and Eliza looked at each other and started laughing like crazy. A confused Helen asked Max, Are they stressed or hysterical? They must be laughing at us. They are having fun, answered Max grudgingly. They are such fools, Eliza said, wiping her tears. All four of us are fools. What do you mean? Was the boy offended? Yes, just offended. Jim was relieved. She and I had a plan to make you both jealous and get you back. They giggled, all four of them. And before they knew it, one of the four men who had been defeated had got up and walked away from the restaurant. And Ben staggered inside, glancing over his shoulder at his laughing friends. Let's see who the woman in love will believe, he threatened. The man he loved or the offended son. Indeed, lads, said the young man. Let's go and hear what this freak is going to come up with now. I wondered about that myself. The four of them entered the foyer of the restaurant. An irate mother was already hurrying toward them, holding her husband with a limp. How dare you ruin my party? The mother's eyes flashed like lightning. I understand that you do not accept my choice, and you do not like it. But to make him refuse to marry me is the height of selfishness, son. This is my life, and I'm the one who has the right to choose how I live and with whom I live. At least hear us out. Helen, you don't have to defend him. He's making up stories to get what he wants. Is that what you think of me, Mother? The son is indignant. I didn't mean to hurt you. I wanted to settle this matter with your gigolo amicably. But since it's an accusation, you're welcome. And the guy turned on the recorder. Soon my wife's entire fortune will be in my hands. She's in love with me like a cat. Whatever I say, she'll do. I only have to please my old lady a little, and she'll throw everything at my feet. The woman hunched over and nodded her head wearily. She walked slowly away from the restaurant. Only her shoulders shuddered with silent sobs. Come, boys. We mustn't leave her alone. And the son followed his mother determinedly. Helen walked over to Ben, spat in his face, caught up with the woman, and walked beside her. Max and Eliza joined their friends. Wait, suddenly the boy stopped. There are guests there. We should have warned them. No need, my son. Through her tears, the mother smiled. At least let somebody have fun tonight. That's right, Helen encouraged her. I'm going to call Mum and explain the situation. Since then, Anne had thrown all her dreams and hopes for happiness with a man out of her head, as if she had given up on herself. But the love of two young couples has flared up with renewed vigor. Jim and Helen, Max and Eliza continued to be friends as pairs. Only they changed the composition. They still spent their free time together, going to the cinema and cafes. And finally, it was time for an internship. Friends decided to do their medical internships in the most difficult hospitals, complicated in the sense that they wanted to be in a place where their help would be not only educational, but also useful to patients who have nothing to hope for anymore. Max and Eliza chose a hospice for Jim, and Helen went to the neuropsychiatric ward, or, as they call it, the mental hospital, or the madhouse. On the first day when Jim and Helen came to the hospital, the interns were invited to go with the medical staff on their rounds. It was a rough sight, not for the faint of heart. The wards for violent and aggressive patients were special, with walls padded with special material so that the patient could not hurt himself during the attack. Some were simply lying unconscious under the influence of the drugs, unresponsive to any sounds or what was going on nearby. It was painful to look at them. Others were talking to break the silence. I cannot imagine how you can live a life when you do not understand who you are, where you are, and what is happening around you. It is not a life at all. Who knows? The boy sighed heavily. Maybe they are happy in their own world, created in the inflamed mind of a sick mind. Not for nothing such people are called mentally ill. It means that their soul hurts. Perhaps it hurts so much that their mind cannot cope with pain and creates another reality. And yet, some people seem quite normal and adequate. Thoughtfully spoke the girl. They answer questions intelligently, even react to jokes. But frankly, the raving scared me so much that I hardly dare go into their rooms without an orderly. And you don't have to go into their rooms. It was, as the doctor said, orientation. We'll fill out case histories, keep an eye on the quiet ones. Did you notice the patient in room 8 who was facing the wall, answering questions without even turning to us? Everyone here is strange, but this one is unusual, isn't he? He stands out from the crowd. Yeah, you hit the bullseye. The guy spoke excitedly. I noticed it too. You know why? He sounded so familiar to me, or rather, his voice. Maybe I got wound up during my rounds. Maybe my nerves were playing tricks on me. But I'm sure I've heard that voice somewhere before. Calm down. The girl touched him gently on the shoulder. You're imagining things. It's just that all these people are such an unusual sight that it leaves an incomprehensible impression on everyone. Maybe that's enough of a heavy feeling for today. Let's go home, or can we go to the cafeteria? Let's call our colleagues. It must be even harder for them. After all, people often die in hospice care, and there is nothing we can do to help, only to relieve it. He agreed, and they said goodbye to the staff and left the ward. The girl immediately called her friend's number, and they agreed to meet in a cafe to exchange impressions about the first day of practice. Already sitting at a table, all four were silent for a while. No, I don't want to work in a hospice, Eliza finally said. It's so creepy. They all know they're doomed, and they're just waiting to die at any moment. Can you imagine such an unfortunate outcome given to the exhausted with endless pain? Yes, Max supported quietly. But the worst feeling remains from those who have accepted their imminent passing and try to maintain the illusion that everything is normal, that it is natural. It pities them even more. They smile, they talk as if nothing not happening. And in my soul, probably, every minute, every second, waiting, here, now, here, today. It's so hard. You see, Helen, Jim smiled sadly. At least most of ours don't know that they're sick and maybe even happy in their world. But I wouldn't say that, the girl sighed. They have their moments of enlightenment, too. I can guess that in those moments they're terrified of what is happening to them and around them. The poor young people discussed their first day on the internet for a long time and parted immersed in their unhappy thoughts. At night, the boy suddenly woke up with a strange sensation. He did not seem to be having a nightmare, but a certain uneasy feeling filled him with cold sweat. He could not get rid of the voice of that sick man he had thought he knew. The voice constantly sounded in his head and made his heart beat fast. Jim calmed himself with the decision to ask the nurses tomorrow about the strange patient. The next day, Jim stopped by to pick up his sweetheart, and together they went to the internship site. Barely dressed, the boy went to see the head nurse. "Clarissa, yesterday, I saw a patient in Ward 8. You know, the one who didn't even turn to us and answered questions while lying facing the wall. Alex." "Was it? Why are you so interested in him?" the woman asked. "I do not know, or rather I can't put it into words, but something about him seemed familiar. The voice, I guess. And where did he come from, this man?" "It's a long story, kid. There's a lot of work to do now. Come back after lunch and I'll tell you all about it. He's a very interesting specimen." Jim was a little offended by this definition of a sick man as a specimen. But the guy was well aware that with patients like that, you can't be too sensitive. One should do one's job, not faint with pity or horror. After lunch, Jim and Helen came in and prepared to hear the story of the unusual specimen. "It was like this," the nurse began. "It was a long time ago, about 9 or 10 years ago. I was just a nurse at the time after college. I myself grew up in an orphanage, so I had strong nerves. And in such wards they pay more than others for the harmfulness, apparently. And in such wards they pay more than others for the harmfulness, apparently. Anyway, on night duty, around midnight a man was brought to us from the emergency room, all beaten up and miserable. There he was, treated for his wounds, bandaged, and had all his tests checked. Most of the wounds were superficial, except that there was also a severe blow to the back of the head. The police came and tried to get a statement, but to no avail. The man had amnesia, probably due to the impact or shock. So they brought him to us to try to get his memory back. He's been with us ever since. There's nowhere to discharge him. He still can't remember anything, and sometimes he has the most terrible headaches. And at such moments when he can't stand the agony, Alex tries to kill himself." "And why is he Alex?" asked the girl. "Does he remember his name after all?" "No, we called him so among ourselves," laughed the nurse of the nurse. "All the same, some, at least conditional, but a name is needed. Why? He hasn't shaved in 10 years. The boy was surprised. "Well, why not? Shock therapy, as the girls and I called it. We brought him a mirror and showed him what he looked like. He got scared and let himself get a shave. And then he started shaving himself. The guy and his girlfriend came out of the nursing room. I want to go see him again. His voice keeps bugging me. Will you come with me?" "Of course I will," she nodded. "I'm always in your support group." They asked the doctor for permission to talk to the patient, and having received permission, they went to Ward 8. When Jim went inside, he saw the man sitting on the bed. Suddenly goosebumps ran all over the young man's body. He froze on the threshold of the room, stunned and dumbfounded. The companion looked at the sharply pale face of her beloved and was frightened. "What happened?" "You look like you've seen a ghost." The guy rushed out of the ward, covering his face with his hands, without even taking off his white coat. The guy ran out of the ward and sat down on a bench, the same way, without taking his palm off his face, and shook for the whole hour. The girl who ran out after him was on the verge of panic. She had never seen her boyfriend in such a creepy state and did not understand what was happening. "Honey, calm down. Tell me, what's got you so scared?" Jim pulled his hands away from his tear-soaked face and said softly, "It's my father, Alex, this one. It's my father, Alex, this one. It's my father." "Are you sure about that?" He's changed a lot, of course, but I'm sure it's my father. So why did you run away, silly? The girl hugged him affectionately. It's wonderful to find him, isn't it? I'm afraid, the boy admitted. When I saw him, so forgotten, native, but a complete stranger, it was like a blow on the head. I was so scared. What if he doesn't recognize me? What if he doesn't recognize me? What if some irreversible changes in his brain had begun? And so many of these thoughts suddenly came over me that I had trouble breathing, so I couldn't help myself and ran away. And that makes sense. The girl thought about it. You and I are future specialists. We'll have to see a lot of things in our medical lives. We'll be fine. We'll go back and try to talk to your father quietly and unobtrusively. That's not what I'm worried about. How do I tell my mother about him? The boy stared at her friend in shock. You're always right in the middle of it. I hadn't thought of that. The young interns returned to the hospital and re-entered room 8. The boy cautiously sat down on his father's bed and in a slightly shaky voice asked, "Hello, Alex. How are you feeling?" "Thank you, doctor. I'm fine. My head does not hurt." The man answered calmly, "And I'm not a doctor." The guy was embarrassed. "We're interning here." To me, all people in white coats are doctors, smiled the sick man. They talked some more, and the boy realized that he did not evoke in his father any memories, not even associations. That was not surprising. After all, it had been so many years since his father had been in the hospital. He was just a kid. In the evening, the boy called a friend to his place. "I don't know how to tell my mom how she'll take it. Let's talk to her together." "Okay," the girlfriend agreed. Ever since the day of the wedding reception, when that horrible thing happened, her mother had changed. It was as if someone had turned off the light bulb that was burning inside the woman. She still went about her business, ate, drank, but became completely indifferent to everything that was going on, as if she had given up on herself. She stopped taking care of her appearance, as she had done before. She put on the first clothes that caught her eye from the closet. Only a worried friend, Helen's mother, could at times bring her friend out of her stupor. And then they talked for a long time, sitting in the kitchen. And the next day, her mother would be the same for a while. So today, to her great relief, young people, my mother and Aunt Rose sat in the semi-darkness of the kitchen and poured from a bottle of dry wine while talking. "Here come the young people," the neighbor rejoiced. "Come and join us. We are getting rather bored." The couple sat down at the table. At last the young man had the courage to leave. "Mom, I have something very important to tell you," he said. "Did our children really important to tell you?" he said. "Did our children really decide to get married?" Grinning, the mother said, "Or maybe they want to tell us that we are going to be grandmothers soon." Aunt Rose snapped up. "That's not what I meant," said the boy. "Don't interrupt me anyway. Here's the deal. Mom, I found my father." Her mother stared at her son in confusion. "Are you kidding me? Do not worry." She hugged her girl, "But it's true." The woman remained silent, but her hands trembled. She went pale. So many years he was gone. So many long years. He was gone. So many long years. Suddenly she jumped up and rushed to her son.
Where is he? Let's go. Hurry, there is not a minute to lose. Why are you silent? Is he alive?
"Calm down, Mother. Father is alive and almost well. We'll go and see him tomorrow morning. But you must know something very important. Father doesn't remember anything. He doesn't even recognize himself or me. He has amnesia, loss of memory." "My God, but it's such a trifle." Excitedly paced from corner to corner of the woman. "The main thing is that he is alive and will get his memory. And if we do not return, no matter. Alive, my darling, alive." Suddenly, the mother fell into a chair and burst into tears. Aunt Rose made a sign to the young men to leave, and she sat down beside her friend and began to say something softly to her. Helen stayed with Jim that night, but no one could sleep a wink. Everyone was making plans, thinking of ways to get her father's memory back and wondering what to do next. By the time the hospital opened, all four were pacing impatiently in front of the head physician's office. As soon as the doctor saw the delegation, he realized that the question was serious and invited everyone into his office. "What is it? What happened? What has brought you to such excitement?" And Jim told the doctor everything, with only occasional hints from his mother. "Gee," the doctor shook his head and took off his glasses. "I don't see any threat to the patient's health if your mother goes to see him now and we watch his reaction." They went to Ward 8, and a shocked woman immediately rushed to her husband. "Hello, honey. Do you recognize me?" "Excuse me, my dear." "Embarrassed," the father replied. "I have, in a way, problems with my memory. You remind me, and I'll try to remember who you are. I am your wife, and this is our son and you." While interning in a mental hospital, the boy found his father, who had been missing for years. Father looked at them intently and held his hands up helplessly. "Sorry, your faces don't remind me of anything, unfortunately." The next day, Anne went into the doctor's office and laid out on his desk everything she could find. The marriage certificate, her husband's death certificate, issued 7 years later. And most importantly, old photographs, together, separately, from the wedding, and just amateur photos. The doctor had no doubts. It was really the woman's spouse. "What do you intend to do?" he asked the woman. "I want to take my husband home," she said decisively, "and as quickly as possible." "Of course you can take your spouse," the head doctor agreed. "It is only necessary to sort out some bureaucratic delays to restore the person's status. But it takes time. And for the patient himself, I think it would be better to be with his relatives and friends rather than in a hospital ward. That is why I authorize you, under my responsibility, to take your husband home immediately. I will prescribe you strong medications. At times he gets severe headaches, and I will instruct you how to deal with him after a migraine attack so that there are no suicide attempts. Basically, I'll explain everything." "Thank you, doctor," the woman glowed. "But you better give all the instructions to my son. He is a future doctor, your intern." That same day, the son and the mother brought the man home. He hesitantly walked around the rooms and sat down on the couch. The son began to show his father the family album, and the father recognized himself in the photos and wondered, "But why don't I remember anything? But you, please do not worry. I will try very hard." "You don't have to try. You don't have to exert yourself," asked the boy. "The memory has to come back on its own, and we will just help you to remember everything." Suddenly the doorbell rang. Mom smiled. "I just called Mom 10 minutes ago." So she has already rushed over. It seems that she did not notice any special love for her son-in-law. Grandma flew into the room as a hurricane and hurriedly spoke. "What a surprise. Victor, where have you been all this time?" As soon as he saw the woman and heard her first words, my father suddenly turned deadly pale. His eyes rolled back and he convulsed, clutching his temples with his hands. My father's body trembled violently, and he screamed. Loud and long and terrible screaming. The boy quickly got the medicine, made his father swallow it and drink water. The grandmother frightened him backwards. "He's sick. He's crazy. He should be locked up in an insane asylum." "Stop it at once, Mom," hardly ordered the woman, helping to sit her husband comfortably in the chair. Gradually the man calmed down and stopped shaking, but he could not take his eyes off the elderly woman and pointed a finger at her. "The witch." At last he said with difficulty, "The murderer." "What are you babbling about, you lunatic?" The old woman became agitated. "Call an ambulance for him. Let them isolate him from normal people." The wife turned to the man. "Honey, do you remember anything?" The father nodded and whispered, Everything. That day, he went out to the store to buy groceries and prepare a meal for his son when he came home from school. As he walked a short way past the garages, he suddenly saw a couple of drunk, homeless people having a scuffle. They were swearing and punching each other. The man rushed to break them up, as it turned out, in vain. The drunkard's rage turned against him. They attacked the man and beat him for a long time until they were completely exhausted and staggered away from the scene of the battle. My whole body was aching and throbbing, he said quietly. There seemed to be not a living thing left, not a single bone in my body. I tried to get up, but I couldn't even move. I don't know how long, but I was like that for a long time. The old woman cringed at the sight of her daughter and grandson. What happened next? Go on, my son asked. And then I just asked her to call an ambulance or to help me get home. I knew that my mother-in-law worked as a paramedic in my village. I thought, I hoped she would help me. She really did promise me that I would feel better. Immediately, she took some kind of ampoule out of my bag and injected me with what she said was a painkiller. And then I remembered nothing. I woke up in the hospital with my head completely empty, and sometimes I would get terrible headaches, sometimes turning into seizures. And that's when I didn't want to live. I wanted to get out of my misery. Mother, the woman said to my mother in a quiet but frightening tone, isn't there anything you want to tell us, to explain? What is there to explain? Granny snarled. Well, I gave him an injection to make him feel better, and he fainted. Maybe it was an allergy. So I called an ambulance and they took him away. That's all. I'm afraid, Grandma, you're not telling the truth, grinned the boy. Don't forget I'm a future physician, and I know a thing or two about medicine too. Maybe you should admit it. What kind of medicine did you inject? A strong tranquilizer. But I had no idea, she explained, that it would be so weak. I wanted to help. Don't, Mother, the woman grimaced. Don't, Mama, the woman grimaced. You knew all about it. You were so calculating, or you would have told us what you knew instead of pretending to worry. That's wonderful. You made it all up for yourself. So, she made it clear. Yes, I did it on purpose, but not for my own sake, but for yours and my grandson's. What was the use of that hobo? He didn't work anywhere. He was as useful as a goat's milk. And you should have found a normal, rich, and hard-working man instead of dragging a clamp around your neck. You were thinking of yourself, not of us. Her daughter turned away from her mother. She wanted to get to the city sooner. You wanted to secure your old age at our expense. Yes, I did. And you owe it to me to take care of me. I gave birth to you and raised you alone, and you owe me everything. Oh, Mama. The woman spoke in despair. I have always helped you. I would have bought you an apartment anyway, and you would have moved to the city. But to bring this moment closer at the cost of a crime, go away, please. It had been exactly 1 year since my father's memory returned. During that time, several significant events had occurred. First, my father was admitted to a private hospital, and the cause of the man's attacks and terrible migraines was determined. It turned out that my father had a brain tumor. Fortunately, it was benign. He underwent surgery, and his health was completely restored. Secondly, Jim, Helen, Max, and Eliza had 2 weddings on the same day at the same restaurant. The young people became so good friends that they even decided to have 1 wedding for 2 couples. The guy was incredibly happy to see his dad and mom happy and rejuvenated on the most beautiful day of his life. They sat at the table and never took their eyes off each other. Grandma wasn't at the wedding. The woman forgave her mother. After all, a mother is a mother, as cliched as it may sound. However, she didn't want to see her at all, and she herself did not show her daughter's family to her eyes. Either her conscience woke up, or she just did not want to admit her guilt and live proudly without them. However, she did not refuse to accept material assistance from her daughter. And God be her judge. After all, the family reunion was worth the loss. The happy family was reunited, and the father got his memory back.